Hi everyone, so this time I'm going to do a quick video on one very specific idea. I got the idea for this short video while I was working on another video, which is something that happens quite often, very often, all the time.
And before you go any further, let me warn you that this video will contain spoilers for all of Loki's appearances in the MCU.
So I was working on a video about how the deleted scenes from Thor should not have been deleted. I will release that one shortly. And while I was doing that, something attracted my attention. One of the deleted scenes featured Loki and Thor having a conversation before the coronation. So if they had not deleted it, this would probably have been our first introduction to adult Thor and Loki. And here is how Loki would have been introduced for the first time. A menacing shadow with his horned helmet. And I thought that was an interesting choice because it reminded me of other scenes that were not deleted. In the same film, Kenneth Branagh uses exactly the same device to introduce us to King Loki sitting on the throne in Loki's characteristic pose from the comics. So it seems to be a motif that the director was attached to. And it's not really difficult to understand why. After all, Loki is meant to be the villain in this first movie, and shadows are traditionally associated with evil and villainy. There is something very ominous in the way Loki was introduced in that deleted scene, and in the final version of the film, in the way his first appearance as King of Asgard was framed. But it's not just in this movie that Loki is associated with the idea of a shadow. And it's not just a cliché associated with villainy either. In Loki's case, it has a more profound meaning. The first thing that came to my mind when I started thinking about Loki and shadows was of course this very striking line from the Avengers. When he confronts Thor for the first time since he let himself fall into the void from the Rainbow Bridge, this is how Loki described his memories of his life in Asgard.
I remember a shadow, living in the shade of your greatness.
And it's an interesting line because it kind of mixes two ideas that are slightly different. One, that Thor was preventing Loki from getting any sunlight for himself, and thus Loki was living in Thor's shadow, living in the shade of your greatness. And two, that Loki felt that he himself was a shadow, presumably Thor's shadow. So first, I want to have a look at this idea of Loki himself being described as a shadow. First, of course, there is the obvious fact that he's presented physically as the dark counterpart to Thor. Thor has blonde hair, wears a bright red cape, even though his armor is dark. But Loki's dark-haired, tends to wear darker colors. Loki also has a tendency to lurk in the shadows. He speaks softly and he can sneak around unseen and undetected. While Thor, on the other hand, is noisy and boisterous with his loud voice and his thunder. There are various references throughout the movies to this idea that Loki is stealthy.
You're better off leaving the sneaking to your brother.
No, I was seeking just going for a walk.
There's not many people who can sneak up on me.
He even has the ability to hide from Heimdall.
I turned my gaze upon you in Jotunheim, but could neither see you nor hear you. You were shrouded from me like the frost giants that entered this realm.
Perhaps your senses have weakened after your many years of service.
Or perhaps someone has found a way to hide that which he does not wish me to see.
There is also this scene in Thor when they're discussing Jotunheim and Loki actually quietly walks out from behind a pillar. He was lurking in the shadows as if he were stalking Thor. We actually see his legs first and then he comes into the frame, as if he were sneaking into the frame. So in a way, it is Loki's superpower to be extremely stealthy. And it is connected to his scheming nature as well. He operates from the shadows. He's a kind of foil for Thor, and like a shadow, he seems to be inseparable from him. Always following him, whispering in his ear, always coming back, even when Thor thinks he's dead. In fact, Thor and Loki are beautifully complementary whenever they actually manage to work together.
Might as well be strangers now. Two sons of the crown, set adrift.
Nope. Thought you didn't want to talk about it.
But I think we can push this a little further, because when Loki said he felt like he was a shadow, he meant something more. A shadow is something that has no physical substance and which is changeable also. It can be connected maybe to Loki's difficulties to get a firm grip on his own identity. He's not really an Asgardian, he's not really a frost giant anymore either. His physical appearance itself is a lie. A shadow is also something not very visible that people don't pay attention to, they take it for granted. And when he lived in Asgard, he felt unseen and unloved, as if he were invisible and were truly just Thor's shadow. And it's really easy to understand why if you rewatch the first Thor movie and pay attention to this, because you'll see that in most of Loki's early scenes with Thor and Odin, everyone seems to behave as if he was not there. Odin never even speaks to him until the big reveal of his true origins. I don't count this as speaking. Now I come to the second idea, which is that of Loki being relegated to the shadows because Thor takes all the sunlight for himself. So Loki being in Thor's shadow. The main line that has this idea is the one that I've already quoted from their confrontation in the Avengers.
I remember a shadow. Living in the shade of your greatness.
And it's also interesting to note that when he's invading Earth and he feels powerful, the opposite image is used. We see Loki all clad in gold armor, basking in the sun. In another scene, this time from the Dark World, that was actually deleted, Frigga uses this exact same metaphor when she says to Thor,
"You and your father cast large shadows. I had hoped by sharing my gifts with Loki that he could find some sun for himself."
Interestingly, the Dark World soundtrack even has a track named Shadows of Loki, but I can't really find it in the movie or connect it to a specific scene that would make the title of this track make sense. I thought maybe it could have to do with the dungeon scene, because we get this wonderful scene in which Loki dispels the illusion of a confident facade to reveal that he has become very much a shadow of his former self. But the track in this scene is clearly another track that's called An Unlikely Alliance, so I'm not sure. If you have spotted it, please let me know in the comments, because I tried several times to watch the movie, paying special attention to the soundtrack, and I never managed to locate this specific track. Now, all of these may seem like random observations. I don't have a big overarching theory about Loki and shadows of the same type that I had on Loki's daggers and his magic, for example. You can watch that video by clicking on the link if you want to have a look. But one of the things that I think is interesting is to connect all of this to Loki's line to Thor before his death in Infinity War.
I assure you, brother, the sun will shine on us again.
It is a very mysterious line, and I'm still not sure what we're supposed to make of it. But here, I want to focus on the implication of this line for his relationship with Thor. Because this is an interesting and very symbolic thing to say for someone who has always complained of being in his brother's shadow. The sun will shine upon us again. Many people have commented on Loki's choice to call himself an Odin's son before he died. It's a way to recognize Thor as his brother, probably more than recognizes Odin as his father, in fact. But to say the sun will shine upon us is a way to signify to Thor that he has gotten over his jealousy and his resentment towards him, by painting a picture of a future in which both of them are in the sun as equals. So it is also a very powerful statement that Loki is making to Thor in that moment, that he's finally reconciled himself with his brother, and he no longer feels that he's constantly in his brother's shadow. They can both have a place in the sun. So it's beautiful. What is interesting as well is the way this highlights a certain consistency in the writing between the various movies. Sure, it's not a very original metaphor, but it's still interesting to see how it keeps coming back and popping up, including in deleted scenes. It's true that I did not find a huge number of examples of this metaphor, but I did find at least one example per movie that Loki was in. And I tried to see if I could find any reference to this idea in the Loki series, but I did not, which makes sense because precisely the series was all about allowing Loki to step out of Thor's shadow. So will Infinity War reveal that he had actually pulled a trick on Thanos? Or will TVA Loki from the series find a way to reunite with Thor? In either case, it will be a Loki that is no longer relegated to the world of the shadows. Thank you very much for watching, and I see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are interested in more Loki analysis. Have a great week. Bye bye.